Everywhere within our environment, there are molecules that mimic estrogen. And the problem with that is that estrogen-like molecules engage with our body very similarly to how our endogenous estrogens do. This can throw our entire balance of not only estrogen out of whack, but other hormones that are related to estrogen as well. Women may experience bloating and swelling and tenderness, irregular menstrual periods, and both men and women may experience changes in sex drive as well as infertility. Changes in our estrogen levels also impact our mood and emotions. People can experience mood swings, anxiety, panic attacks, brain fog, memory problems, and the presence of excessive estrogen also leads to problems with metabolism and homeostasis. People may experience weight gain or hair loss, which may be a sign of problems with the thyroid system, difficulty regulating temperatures, especially within our hands and feet. We also may have changes in the hormonal governance of our sleep patterns via cortisol and melatonin, leading to insomnia at night and fatigue during the day. Today's episode is all about what are the estrogen-like molecules in our environment and how can we minimize our exposure to them and wade through often confusing research that seems to cast doubt about whether or not estrogen-like molecules are harmful for human health. Let's get to the show. Welcome to The Lindsay Elmore Show, a podcast that helps you find fulfillment amidst chaos. On this show, I interview thought leaders, doctors, creatives, spiritual gurus, and game changers who inspire you to pursue your dreams, overcome obstacles, and leave your mark. Dr. Anthony J. is the author of the best-selling book, Estrogeneration. He wrote the book to help people understand clearly and simply what estrogenic substances are, what are the most prevalent ones within our daily lives, and how can we take action to avoid the deleterious effects of exposure to synthetic estrogens throughout our entire life. Dr. J has a PhD from Boston University School of Medicine and has been a researching scientist at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota for the past 3 years. He helps people through his consulting company analyze their DNA data to create personalized health care strategies that can help them to optimize their health. Dr. Anthony J., welcome to the Lindsay Elmore Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I am very, very intrigued by your work, and I especially love how you originally got into researching the prevalence and the dangers of artificial estrogens in our environment. And in reading your book, Estrogeneration, one of the most profound things is that we're surrounded by estrogens and that there's no way to get away from them in a lot of our daily life. Let's start our conversation by talking about where are we exposed to estrogens and artificial estrogens in our daily lives, and what are some of the most common words we can look for? What are some of the most common ingredients that might be out there that we can just start to tune our antennas about, like, ooh, this isn't estrogen that's out there and it could be dangerous for me.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. And yeah, these chemicals are troublemakers because a lot of the scientific research, and I'm a scientist, right? So I do some of this research myself. I have firsthand experience. A lot of the previous and ongoing research relates to toxicology. So scientists are literally putting some BPA or some phthalates or some parabens or some of these artificial estrogen chemicals on cells growing in a dish. And then they're looking to see whether that kills the cells, or what's the dose that kills the cells. How much does it take to kill cells? And that's kind of it's effective for a lot of things, for toxins, for different chemicals that are man-made. They're artificial. They're not found in nature. Problem is, these chemicals are acting like estrogen. So it's not that shocking to your cells. Your body has estrogen. And so it's not a shocking thing to have a little bit more, or some of these chemicals that act like estrogen. And so it usually doesn't kill the cells, unfortunately, because then scientists mislabel them as safe and not toxic and things like that historically. And then as you do more research and you realize it's disrupting all of these valuable sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, there's actually 3 different types of estrogen in your body naturally. There's estrone, there's estriol, estradiol. So you start disrupting these things. There's other hormones like progesterone. And it's a really delicate balance, and it can cause a lot of health issues. So, I mean, some of the big chemicals to look for generally relate to the plastics. That's a big category. If you start, drinking liquids out of plastics, whether they're hot or not, there's quite a bit of leaching. And, BPA is a good historical example of that. But even if it's BPA free, there's a surprising number of estrogen chemicals to watch out for in plastics. You can definitely make plastics without them, but most companies don't. And it's a challenge to make plastics without these estrogen chemicals. And then another big category is personal care products. And you were asking about the ingredients specifically to look for, but unfortunately, a lot of personal care, they don't even list the ingredients, these at least related to these artificial estrogens, because they don't have to. They can put it on. They can use the word fragrance on the label, and they can literally hide all these chemicals in there. So you're looking for these chemicals, and you come across the word fragrance or perfume. Sometimes they use it, and they're legally allowed to just put them in there. And so that causes problems for the consumer looking to try and have decent quality products. So oftentimes you just have to trust the company. You have to understand whether they're looking out for you, and hopefully you can read all the ingredients on the list. But phthalates would be a big one on personal care products, and so would parabens, because scientists, I've talked to PhD scientists about those chemicals and why would you bother putting them in a fragrance, And they'll say it's because, well, number one, it's filler, it's cheap, it's petroleum products, right? It's coming from oil, so it's really dirt cheap. But then number two, they make the argument that it carries the fragrance farther through the air, and so there is a logical explanation. But if it's causing harm to your health, it doesn't really, like that extra foot that you might get from your fragrance scent or something like that is obviously not worth it. And it's a problem because even the shampoos, the conditioners, the soaps, people think they're washing that stuff off and it's going in the drain, but in reality, those estrogen chemicals love to absorb through your skin. They like to stay on your skin. They don't really like the water. It's called hydrophobic. They're hydrophobic. They're afraid of water, phobia. And so they prefer to stay on your skin. Your skin is fairly fatty. And the analogy I would use is chicken skin. If you've heard people say, "Oh, don't eat the chicken skin; it's all fat." Well, it's not necessarily bad for you, but it is fatty for sure, and your skin is also fatty, so it stores up these estrogen chemicals.
So let's take a step back, because I think that we go through and we're like, okay, I have estrogen inside of my body, but I think that a lot of people don't understand how receptor chemistry works and how molecules can engage with our different receptors. And, me as a pharmacist, I think it's fairly easy to understand how you can take an artificial estrogen pill that interacts with your estrogen receptor. But in reading your book, it sounds like that everything that you're recommending, the plastics that we eat and drink in our food, which I've heard it estimated that we eat about a credit card's worth of plastic a week is average. And people who aren't cognizant of these things may be eating much more. It sounds like that all of the estrogenic molecules that we're exposed to in personal care products that we absorb through our skin, absorb through our scalp, the plastics that we're ingesting, all engage with that estrogen receptor very similarly to how it would be if you take a pill. So, talk to us about how receptors work. And I'd love for you to highlight one of the scariest things is that sometimes there is an irreversible binding of the estrogen receptor where the estrogen receptor just gets turned on and never gets turned off.
Exactly. Yeah, and scientists call that constitutively active, and they use those kinds of things in research studies to literally turn on receptors. It's like turning on a light switch, and if you put super glue on the top of the light switch and turned it on, you wouldn't be able to turn it off. And you can do that with receptors, and we do it in, like say, in studies all the time. You don't want to do that in your own body, but unfortunately there's the potential for that. We don't know for sure if that's happening, but it's certainly a high probability according to organic chemists I've talked to. And so basically, going back to receptors, and I know you're looking through my book and you've read some of this, but a lot of receptors and hormones, they don't act throughout your whole body. They just act in one specific place. Like leptin is the example I often use because that's a hunger hormone. And if you're eating a bunch of food, your fat cells secrete this hormone called leptin. And you don't have receptors in your liver. You don't have receptors in your muscle cells. So like leptin, this hormone's going through your body. It goes into your liver. It comes out of your liver. There's no receptors picking it out. It goes into your muscles, it goes out of your muscles. There's no receptors picking it out. But when it gets to your brain, there's actually leptin receptors sticking out of cells that stick to it, bind it, and that tells your brain that you're full. Stop eating. But estrogen, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending how you look at it, but there's receptors through your whole body. So if you've got, natural estrogen levels that are all dialed in, real precise, real optimized, it's excellent for you. And it has interactions with your brain. And that's why if you disrupt that, you see depression, you see mood disorders. But normally it's actually good for your brain. It's protective for your brain. If you're disrupting, if you're going to see interactions with your liver, and if you disrupt that, you'll see clotting and various blood problems. There's interactions with your muscles, right? I mean, testosterone, estrogen, muscle development. There's a lot of different things, fertility. So you have estrogen receptors all throughout your body. But it's actually even more interesting than that, because I know you wanted to talk about soy at some point. So it's worth going into even more detail than normal. And I didn't even talk about this in my book, but it's worth going into more depth here.